Our speaker this evening is David. He's CEO of a firm called London Pharma, about which he'll tell us more shortly. He was instrumental in the implementation of brachytherapy a few years ago, but much more of that as well. He's also taking part in the ITU World Triathlon Sprint Championship, which sounds rather painful, but again, we'll be telling us more about that. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to David. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all here. A little bit about myself. I'm a pharmacist by profession. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry all my life. My wife's also a pharmacist. I'll tell you a little story about that later on as well. When two pharmacists get together, what happens to your children, or what your children say of you later on. But how did I get involved with brachytherapy? Well, and prostate cancer indeed. How did I get involved with prostate cancer? My background, a pharmacist, always been in the pharmaceutical industry. I started with large pharma, Glaxo and Abbott. Then I went to, stepped out of the pharma industry and I went into biotech and biotech supplies. And then I found myself in Amersham, which is in imaging. And that was my first dalliance with oncology. And that's where I got into prostate cancer and also more specifically brachytherapy. After that, I was fascinated by oncology, so I joined a company called OSI here in Oxford and helped bring another oncology drug to market, Tarceva, which is used in lung cancer and a whole host of other cancers as well. And then I started a spin-out from Oxford University. I was lured by Oxford University and the Dons to do a spin-out, so I did that, sold it to a company in Cambridge, but I'm still allowed back into Oxford. Only just, even though I sold it to Cambridge. And then from there, after that, I started looking at several spin-outs, and one of them happened to be London Pharma, and which I've been helping for the last 4.5 years. And again, we have a very interesting product and compound in oncology. More about that later. So I've been quite involved in oncology over many, many years. And as I say, I first got introduced to it when I was at Amersham. Now, Amersham is an interesting company. I don't know if you know about Amersham as it was then. It's the old radiochemical centre, started in the 1940s. Really good at radiation, really good at imaging, and when I joined them, I ran all their manufacturing sites worldwide, and we were looking to increase and build and grow. And during that, we actually bought some imaging product, and along came with it this thing called brachytherapy. Now, brachytherapy was a therapy, and Amersham is imaging, and the two don't go together. So they didn't quite know what to do with it, so they just left it to one side and let's see what would happen, because something would happen with time. But coming to brachytherapy, I don't know if any of you know anything about brachytherapy. Does anyone know anything?
A friend of mine's had it.
Right.
Had the treatment.
Okay. So where does it come from? Well, brachy is actually from Greek, and it means short, and it's short distance. So it's therapy in a short distance. So effectively what it involves is putting radiation very close to where you want to kill, i.e. a cancer, and you get activity over a very, very short area as a result of that. I mean, it was first used round about probably 1901, I think. Was when it was the early use. I'm not quite sure. It wasn't specifically for prostate cancer. It was just effectively they opened somebody up for an operation and threw in some radioactivity and closed them up, and that was it. Okay, and hopefully it would stay there and it would actually kill the cancer and not anything else. So that was the early days, and it sort of grew over the years, and it was really in the 60s and 70s that brachytherapy as a treatment started to be used. It mainly was used in things like brain cancers, glioblastomas. And then someone had the bright idea of saying, oh, well, why don't we pop it in the prostate? That's probably a good place to put it. You know, it's sort of like could just sit there and just cook away and it'll all be nice. So that was how it started to be used, and they started to use it in prostate cancer with varied results. And the varied results were really because of they couldn't see where they were putting it in the first place. So actually placement, so you couldn't really map the prostate and look at it and say, well, how can we place these products in the right place? They couldn't see that. That was number one. And secondly, they couldn't actually predict where the radiation would be, and so therefore how you'd get proper coverage in the prostate. So that was a bit of a problem. So it sort of fell from favour as other treatments became used, particularly external beam radiation. That tended to take over from it. Forward then to the 80s, so the mid-80s, more of an interest started coming back in with just one or two areas. There was a chap on the west coast of America in Seattle, and he was Professor John Laskow, and he was starting to look at, well, how could we start to place the seeds in the right place, or pellets in the right place? How could we put the radioactivity in the right place to actually keep it in, and how could we see that? So he started looking at ways in which he could do that. And he got together with a chap on the, this is in the States, on the east coast of the States, Kent Wallner at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they started to flick ideas backwards and forwards. And they came up with a plan. And so they started to encourage people to get involved with brachytherapy, and that's where the original Amersham products started to be manufactured for. So then, step forward into the early 90s, I arrived at Amersham. I was helping Amersham grow their business and look to grow their imaging, and suddenly we had this thing called brachytherapy. What do we do with it? Well, I ran the manufacturing sites, and we actually used to make these things. And again, I don't know if any of you have seen a brachytherapy product, but what it basically is a titanium shell, well, it's a titanium rod, which actually you laser cut, and then you weld it at one end, and into it you place some radioactive iron that's on iodine, 125, that's on a silver wire. So you put your little silver wires into your radioactive iodine. You basically just roll that and let it cover it, and then you lift them out one at a time and pop them into the little tube that you've welded at the bottom end, and then you weld the top end. And believe it or not, we used to do that by hand. So it was all hand weld. So every single pellet that was produced was made by hand. And it was incredible. And so I came in, I wandered in, I started wandering around seeing where they were doing these things, and I'm thinking, my God, how are we doing this? How many did we put into somebody? Oh, on average 92. 92? 92? That's 184 welds, because we've got to weld the bottom and the top. And so it was a case of, well, how can we do this? Surely we can start to automate it, but how many do we make this for? And it was, well, we only make it for a few people because it's not a big seller for us. So I started to get interested in it, and I was saying, well, why are we doing it? How is it used? And so I started to get interested in, well, where did it go? So I sort of followed the radioactivity to the end, to the people, and say, well, okay, who's involved with this? And that's where I got involved with Professor John Laskow and Kent Wallner in the US, and saying, well, what are you doing with it? You're putting it where? I mean, my goodness, how are you putting it there? And they said, well, we've got this idea. We could actually use needles and push the needles in. And I said, what? Show me. Well, actually, no, don't show me. Because I was starting to wince. I was starting to sort of clench my buttocks as I was walking along, thinking, my goodness, how are you getting it in there? And so I looked at them, and they had ideas of how they could actually put it in. And it really interested me, because I was fascinated by what they were doing. It was a little Heath Robinson. But also, Amersham had some really, really interesting people. And I brought what they were doing back to Amersham and said, look what they're doing with these little pellets. And they're all going, what? They're putting it where? My God, how are they doing this? And so I said, well, they've got this sort of thing that they like to do, and they like to stick people up. And, and I said, brachytherapy, it's the revenge of the woman. And I said, and they said, what do you mean? I said, well, it's the only time the men get to put the feet in the stirrups. It's talk about assume the position. Guys, it was just, and I was explaining this to the guys and the girls at Amersham, and I was saying, there must be a better way, surely. And so we started to doodle and think of ideas and how we could do things. Well, luckily at that time, there were some advances. First of all, Amersham knew all about radioactivity, and we knew how to map it, what to do with it. We knew how to do dosimetry. So therefore, we could develop the software to help the brachytherapy practitioners in terms of mapping where you should put radioactivity, because the beauty about radioactivity is you know exactly what it's going to do. It's highly predictable. You know exactly where you can, what it is. If you put a piece of radioactivity on the table, you know exactly where to stand. You stand here, you're okay. You stand there, you're not okay. It's so predictable, and it's not going to do anything. And it's so you think, okay, well, we can understand that. We can map that. We can create this dosimetry. We can create where we put the seed. Okay. Next thing is, we've got to be able to see it, because we're not actually going to be there. We're going to be looking at something that's encased in a human body. How do we do that? Well, we didn't do that, but we were into imaging, and we helped other people create a thing called TRUS. So it was transrectal ultrasonography. So all of a sudden, we could suddenly start to see inside, bang, and we could light up the prostate, and we could actually see where we were actually going to place things. So then things got very interesting very quickly, because again, one of the games that we used to play was battleships. So you start to look at it, you say battleships. Hey, how do you do battleships? A1, B2. What do we need for that? Oh, if we put a plate up in front of people, and we could have A1, B2, and we could create this plate, then we've got an axis to work from. And when we've got this axis to work from, if we've got this transrectal ultrasonography going up, so if we can put a nice probe up the back passage, guys, and we could light up the prostate, we could get that, and suddenly we could get a bit of a 3D vision going on, and we know what we're doing. There's a good idea. So we worked with John Blasko, and we worked with Kent Wallner to say, well, okay, guys, we could help you, and we could create this. And so by working with them, we actually developed a methodology of actually undertaking brachytherapy. Now, Kent and John were actually doing that to some extent. What we did was we helped them improve it. And not only did we help them improve it, but we then start to say, well, let's look at the whole process. What do we need? You need equipment. You need a table to do it on. You need, okay, let's get people in who know all about building proper tables. Let's get other people together. We need kits. Let's get people together who could do that. So let's put together a whole process for doing brachytherapy. And that's how we did it. We developed that with these guys. These guys became our experts, and that was in the US. Well, Amersham's based in the UK, and we're in the UK. So we needed people over here. So the key was as to say, well, let's bring experts in. So we got people who were interested. And in the UK, the early pioneers were Professor Dan Ash up in Leeds and Professor Stephen Langley down in Surrey. And so I got together with those to say, look, we could help you. We want to help you through Amersham. We want to help develop this. And they were keen to do that, so that's what they did. They started to go ahead. Now, Dan and the team, David Bottomley and co, up in Leeds, they set about training centres. And Stephen down in Surrey set about training physicians, urologists and radiation oncologists on doing the actual sort of procedure. And that's really how we started to develop brachytherapy coming through. And of course, we were helping develop this new technique, which had been around for a long time, so it was really an old technique, but we were making it better. But of course, you have a number of the soothsayers of saying, well, okay, yes, but it's still voodoo medicine, it's radioactivity, you don't know what's going to happen. Oh, well, you know, how well does it do? You need data, you need 10-year data. Because one of the options for prostate cancer, of course, is the ultimate option is a radical prostatectomy, and that had been around for years, and there was lots of 10-year data on radical prostatectomy. So it was actually seen as the gold standard was, what was your survival rates like at 10 years? Well, of course, to do that, you needed to trawl through the data. Now, luckily, Kent and John had been developing it since around about 88, 89, so they already had a few years worth of data, although it was a little bit hit or miss. Having said that, the data still look pretty good. So as we came into it, sort of later on, we started to quickly help them develop the process, and immediately you suddenly start to see the data started to improve. We were able to predict where the prostate cancer was. We were able to map it, and we were able to dose up properly. Now the beauty about, again, look, coming back to Amersham, is because we had the techniques, the technology and the wherewithal to understand radioactivity, we could help create the software packages to actually map out where to put each of the little pellets. And we worked with them to create, well, what is the ultimate and what is the best coverage. We also worked with them in a lot of their research in terms of looking at the beauty about doing radical prostatectomy is actually you actually take out the whole prostate. Now what we also saw is that we could actually through some of the early sort of prostate cancer patients who had then passed on, not necessarily through prostate cancer, they'd passed on just because of end of life, through other diseases or just old age. So effectively, we were able to look at a number of actual prostates that had been removed, and actually look at where prostate cancer actually spread to. So we'd taken all the radicals who didn't have any prostate brachytherapy, and we actually were able to look at those, and we actually saw over hundreds of those that the cancer only spread maximum of around about 2 to 3 millimeters outside the capsule. So when it breaks through the capsule, you get growth to 2 or 3 millimeters. After that, it actually is metastasizing, so it's actually developing through the system, but actual hard growth is 2 to 3 millimeters outside the capsule. So we then worked out, okay, how do we cover it with brachytherapy? Well, if we actually place the radiation in such a place that you get coverage up to 5 millimeters outside the capsule, you're actually going to ensure that you've totally covered the prostate capsule, and you can nicely cook, and I use the term nuke. You can nuke everything in that area. We also know where the urethra goes, and we also know the other things that we've got to avoid, such as the anus and the bladder. So again, we know where they are, we can see them, we know where the urethra is, we can see those, and so therefore we can actually aim to plant all our little seeds, all our little pellets, so that we spare those, so that we give good coverage, but we don't fry those, we don't cook those effectively. So again, that's what we started to do. We helped the clinicians actually develop the process, develop the technique. We were able to see from taking out prostates from the radical prostatectomy where the disease was, and then we backfilled to say, well, how do we need to deliver prostate cancer, to brachytherapy. That's what we did, and then the results started coming in, and the results were quite simply staggering. We started to see survival rates increasing and increasing. Of course, the big key about of prostate cancer, any cancer, is actually catching it early. And the very interesting thing in the US, because they actually started doing screening a lot earlier than us, we actually started to see better results in the US to start with than the UK, and that's because we were catching the guys a lot earlier, and so therefore we could see, and we could get a flavour for exactly what the issues were with prostate cancer, in terms of, if you catch it early, what are your chances of survival, as it were. If you catch it late, what are your chances there, and what's your probability and your prognosis there. I think many of you have already been touched with prostate cancer, or you know about it, so you know about the different staging. Is that true? Okay. So again, T1, T2, T3, T4. And if you look at brachytherapy, then brachytherapy is best served for people who are T1 and T2. Okay? It can be used in T3, where you've actually broken through the capsule, but T4, where you've got metastases, again, you've got the mets going away, it probably isn't going to be utilised there. Brachytherapy as well, as we found as we were undertaking all our studies, was that it's better if you've got a prostate volume of, well, below 50, but we tend to like it somewhere around about the mid-30s to 40s. If it is 50 or above, there are ways in which you can actually reduce it down with some hormonal therapy to start with. That'll help shrink down your prostate, and you can then look to have brachytherapy after that. But ideally, we'd like to have a prostate of a decent size, not too large, so that you can actually again get total coverage. So that was the sort of history of brachytherapy coming through, the history of getting to where we are today. And in terms of, you know, how is brachytherapy compared to other treatment modalities? Well, again, it's about looking at your lifestyle and looking at what you really want. Brachytherapy is very good in certain aspects. Radical's good in certain aspects. Watchful waiting is good in certain aspects. Hormonal therapy is good in certain aspects. And then it's a case of saying, well, okay, what works well for me? Particularly with one of the things we saw very early with brachytherapy was the actual incidence of incontinence and impotence dropped like a stone. I mean, the incidence rate of incontinence is 1 to 2%, probably less. Impotence, it's the same. It's 1 to 2%. So it's pretty good in that respect. So it's a good treatment there. Of course, brachytherapy, the prostate remains intact inside you, and therefore, for a number of people, the fact of knowing that you've got the big C still inside you, potentially, you know, is a bit of a worry, and that's understandable, and therefore, you know, having a radical prostatectomy is sometimes favourable because, hey, you're cutting it out, and therefore you're getting rid of it, and therefore that must be a good thing. But again, you know, you've got to weigh up what's right for you. So it's about having an informed choice. If I look at the results coming back to as we were developing this through, if I look at the results for the first 5 years versus the second 5 years of the 10-year data that we were pulling together, again, in the first 5 years data, we were probably seeing sort of incontinence and impotence rates down. The impotence rate was down very low right from the word go. The incontinence rate was probably down to about 20% in the first 5 years. The second 5 years, when we started to be able to actually plan where we were putting the seeds and place them properly and understand and see them, then that's when the rates dropped down to, you know, below 1%, and they're getting better ever since, because again, now we can start doing mixed dosing in terms of, you know, we can actually, where we've undertaken biopsies, and particularly with multiple biopsies, you can see where on earth you've actually got areas of cancer, and you can actually then place those, and you could actually place in slightly more I'd call a hotter seed, so a greater energy seed at that place, and that will you know, effectively ensure that you ablate that area. If I look at then, you know, in terms of, that was my experience of being part of the development. I also was involved very much in prostate cancer more broadly, because I was interested, well, how did our modality stack up with all the other treatments? But also, when you get involved with cancer, like I did, I'm a naturally curious person, but also I like to see, well, hey, it might happen to me one day. I better learn a bit more about this. And so, again, as part of Amersham, where I was there, Amersham was a very interesting company. It had a lot of very interesting people in it. And so and we were quite large, and we also got phone calls at Amersham saying, you know, will you give to this charity, will you give to that charity, etc. And so I approached the CEO and said, hey, why don't we have a charity of the year? And this was back in the 90s. And I said, let's have a company charity of the year. And so he said, that's a good idea. What should we do? I said, I know. Why? Let's prostate cancer. Because we've got something which we're going at. Let's do that. So we actually chose the Everyman campaign, part of the Institute of Cancer Research, as our charity of the year, the very first one we did. And so we had a year of putting on events for prostate cancer. And that really got me involved with prostate cancer in a big way, and also helped me see an awful lot of things. And that is that blokes are totally scared of it. I mean, you know, we had all sorts of events. One of them I remember where it really brought it home to me. We had everything was big in those days, so we had the big bike ride. So we had a motorcycle bike ride up to the British Motorcycle Federation rally at Peterborough. I drove the white van because we were putting up a stand there, and we put up a stand not for Amersham but for Everyman campaign for prostate cancer, because we weren't advertising our product, we were looking at awareness, raising the awareness for prostate cancer. And it was fascinating, because you got a group of hairy bikers walking around the Peterborough Showground, and we were waving our boxes saying, come and talk about prostate cancer. You know, have you felt yours lately? You know, and all the blokes, not doing that. And the only ones that came into the tent, or the only ones that stopped to talk to us, were the guys that had the ladies with them. And it was the ladies that said, here, let's go and talk here. And that was it. And that really taught me something about blokes. We don't talk about it. We like to hide away. We like to shun away from it. And it was quite an eye-opener for me. And I was thinking, well, how on earth can we change that? And I thought it was only by getting part of awareness. And so I was very instrumental thereafter in trying to raise the awareness through the prostate cancer charities, through prostatecancer.org, brachytherapy.org, Everyman campaign, everything like that. And it's groups such as this. It's wonderful to actually raise awareness and actually talk about it and getting it going. So that was fascinating. And also at that time, what did it teach me? It taught me, you know, I was, oh gosh, a bit younger than I am now. So therefore, but I was younger than the age of actually having a regular PSA check, for example. And so therefore, you know, I was under the radar. So I went along to my GP and I said, I'd like to have a PSA check, please. And he looked at me and he said, don't talk daft. He said, absolutely stupid. You don't want a PSA check. It'll just worry you. No, I'm involved in prostate cancer. Look, brachytherapy, blah, 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 blah. You know, it's all this, and I want a PSA check. And he said, no, you don't. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, no, you don't. And that went backwards and forwards. And eventually I said, look, just humour me. I'm getting stressed just by talking. You're not allowing me for a PSA check. I'll pay for it. All I want to do is I want to look at my rate of rise. I don't, you know, and I won't worry. And I know my rate of rise, you know, my prostate PSA will go up slowly over time. But I want to measure my rate of rise, and I need more than 2 dots, 2 points. I need at least 3 points to be able to draw a straight line and start to work out what my rate of rise is. So please, you know, humour me. And so if I start early, then I'll get a nice baseline. So he said, on that basis, I'll do it. So I went along for an annual PSA check there and then, and everything was fine, everything's good. And that's good. And my PSA was just bundled along and slowly doing what it is. Imagine to my surprise, back in, oh gosh, when was it now? 2005, I went along, bang, my PSA had shot up. Uh-oh. And so I said, he said, the doctor phoned me up and said, oh, your PSA is a bit high. And I said, yeah. I said, let's not worry. I said, it's probably just a blip. Let's take it again in 3 months, it'll be okay. And he said, that's a good idea. So I did. I took it again in 3 months, and yeah, lo and behold, it dropped back down, no problem. So I went along and meandered along for another 5 years. 2010, boom, my PSA shot up again. Uh-oh. So doctor phones me up and he says, PSA's gone up again. I said, yeah, it's all right. Give it 3 months. We'll have another one. No, David, we're not doing that. And I said, the boot's on the other foot now. When I came to you originally, I was saying, please give me a PSA. And he was saying, no, you don't want that. You're far too young for that. Now you're saying you need to go to the next step. And he said, yes. He said, humour me. I said, I've heard that. Humour me? Okay, I'll humour you. I said, I humoured you so many years ago. He said, now you humour me. I said, all right, what am I going to do? He said, I'm sending you for biopsy. Oh, no, that's no good. I don't want that. That could be painful. And he said, humour me. I said, you're a sadist. Anyway, I went along and I had a biopsy. And so I had my biopsy, and then I had that and went along for the results. And I'd planned everything going forward. In fact, you know, everything was fine, this, that, and the other. I wandered in, and my wife came with me for the results. Imagine my surprise when there was a normally dressed nurse in the corner, and who didn't have a uniform on. And I thought, oncology nurse, okay. I've been around enough prostate brachytherapy and prostate cancer to know that. It's a bit strange. And so the oncologist, the consultant started talking to me and started talking to me about my lifestyle and this, that, and the other, etc. And it was all very nice. And and I looked on his notes, and I read upside down. I said Gleason 7, and I can read upside down. So I looked at him. I said, okay, I got adenocarcinoma. Right. What have I got? Is it T1? He said yes. I said, excellent. Now let's talk about my choices. Let's walk through them. So he started to walk through them. Well, you know, you said you're active, you play a lot of squash, you do a lot of this, you do a lot of that. This is that, other. Okay, yeah. And a very active lifestyle. Okay, yes. I said, fine. That's right. So I want to talk about a radical. And he said, okay, well, we talked through the pros and cons of a radical. And then he said, yes, but it's probably not for you, but, you know, I said, no, fine, let's talk about something else then. Let's talk about, all right, let's talk about hormonal. Right, this is it, but with your age and what you're doing, this, that, and the other, probably not right for you, this, that, and the other, okay, fine. So I said, okay, I said, what's next on the list? And he said, well, there's this thing called brachytherapy. And I was really pleased that was, you know, I'd introduced radical, I'd introduced hormonal, and then I left the floor open to him, and he came up straight away with brachytherapy, which was for me was quite pleasing, because I thought he was going to hit me with external beam radiation next. But I thought, fair enough, that's good. So I said, oh, interesting. I said, brachytherapy? He said, yes. So I said, yes, it's this. Where I said, tell me. I said, how many have you done? And he looked at me and he said, oh, about 100. I said, oh, that's good. We can keep talking then. And he looked at me and said, yes. You seem to know a little bit about this. And I said, well, I do know a little bit, yes. And so I said, where did you train? And he said, oh, Stephen Langley. And I said, oh, interesting. And then the nurse in the corner said, oh, we were taught by Dan Ash up at Leeds. I said, oh, that's good. And so then I explained what I'd been involved with and how I'd started those 2 centres to do the training in the UK, and I'd created up to 90 centres around Europe as training centres, you know, as centres of excellence, how to spread brachytherapy around Europe. And that's how I'd developed it throughout the States. And so we chatted about it, and that was it. And I came out of there, and you know, I'd gone through brachytherapy and everything, but I have to say, when I came out of there, we were walking back to the car, my wife said to me, how did you do that? And I said, what do you mean, how did I do what? And she said, it was like 2 consultants talking to one another about some random third-party person, some patient who wasn't you. And I said, it's the only way I could deal with it, to be honest. I had to disassociate myself from it. And for the next couple of days, it really hit me. And I was saying to Jules, I was just saying, look, I want a radical. I just want this out of me. You know, this is ridiculous. It's just got to go. It's just got to come out. I just don't want it inside me. And so, and I angst about it over the next, you know, few days, thinking about that. And then I started to think, well, come on, David, you developed brachytherapy. you believe in the treatment, you've seen all the data. The data's irrefutable. It's really good. It's actually good for your lifestyle, for what you want. Really, you should do that. And so I started to think, well, yeah, I re-examined my lifestyle, I re-examined my long-term aims, I re-examined that. I looked at all the options again, but I came down to brachytherapy as being for me. So then, with due respect to the consultant that I went to, it's actually Maidstone in Kent, a great place, great team there, but I thought, no, I'm going to Dan Ash because I know them. Dan had retired by then, but David Bottomley had taken over, and I knew David very well. In fact, David and I were thrown out of a bar in Seattle together, so I knew him very well indeed. It's only because we didn't have any ID, and so we'd gone into this. We'd been at the Seattle Prostate Clinic as part of a research team in brachytherapy, and so everyone had gone into the bar. We'd gone in there, and then we were carded once we were in, and they said, "Oh, no card, you're out." And we were quite pleased that we actually, were considered to be under 21. But in another way, we were a bit peeved that we couldn't stay and have a beer with everybody. So we quickly got a taxi back to the hotel, got our passports, came back and got back in. So we were all right. But it was that. I wanted to go somewhere that I knew. David and the team have done something like 2,500 brachytherapy implants. So they were pretty good at it. And so I thought, right, I want to be in safe hands. And there we are. But in reality, anyone who's done more than 50 implants is actually worthwhile talking to. But please, if you're going to have brachytherapy, ask them if they've done 50 implants. But you're all right round here, because Oxford, they've done more than 50 implants. And Oxford is a great area for brachytherapy. They are top notch. So that's how I started to see brachytherapy from the other side, because it was great when I was all part of one side, talking about and helping with the development of it, and I was talking to people about it as if I knew, in terms of, oh, it's all right, you have this, you have it in the morning. There's places we trained in for example, the Chicago Prostate Clinic, a brilliant place. You went in at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you came out at 10:30, complete. You'd had your brachytherapy, everything. You didn't even have breakfast, and it was wonderful. And that's fine. And off you went, which was great. But when I actually had it, I travelled up to Leeds to have it. So they actually said to me, "Look, David, you're travelling up. We'd like you actually to stay in for 2 nights." And I went, 2 nights? What are you doing? And said, "Well, you're travelling up in the afternoon. Stay overnight. You're going to be first on the list in the morning. And because you're travelling back down to the south of England, we want to make sure you're okay. So we're going to keep you in just overnight, and you're going to go out the following morning." So I said, "Okay, fine, we'll do that." As it turns out that yes, I was first on the list, and so the needles were still sharp when they used me, which was great. But it was actually quite interesting, because having watched a procedure and having gone through that end, that's one thing. But then being in there in the anteroom before the operation, and actually talking to the anaesthetist and thinking, okay, and I'm already sitting in the stirrups, because they've already sat me up in the stirrups. I'm starting to think, okay, this is a little bit strange. You're right. Do I really want to be here? I've seen it from the other end. Now I'm seeing it from this end, and so it was actually interesting from that side. It was also interesting in that I'd talk to people about, well, brachytherapy's fine, it's great. You just have it, bang, have it in the morning, go off and get on with the rest of your life. It's not a problem. But I have to say, having had the radioactive implants inserted into me, and then having the full force of them, then yes, it's fine, but be prepared for it. As I thought I was, but in reality I'd taken it too glibly, because I'd just been from the other end seeing it. Oh yeah, just throw them in, it's okay. This, that, and the other, bang. Just follow the map, play battleships, and it's okay. And so when you actually have the treatment, again, for the first few days afterwards, it's not a problem. You think it's a little bit sore and discomfortable afterwards. And indeed, after I had mine, when I woke up, because I decided to have a general, not a local, so I had mine. I went down at 8 o'clock in the morning, and when I woke up, sort of, later on that morning, around lunchtime-ish, and I was sat up in the bed. There was, of course, a Geiger counter next to me, and the interest in me, I couldn't resist it, could I not? So you grab the Geiger counter. All right, can I? Let's have a look and see if I can hear myself. And of course you can. So therefore that's why they say don't sit with children on your lap after you've had brachytherapy for a little while. And so that's it. So therefore, but yes, you can actually get a reading if you put the Geiger counter fairly close to you. So again, it is because again, when you have the brachytherapy, you are pretty hot to start with, because the idea is you put these seeds inside you, and you're going to be therapeutically active for around about 9 months. Now, iodine 125 has a half-life of 60 days, so about 2 months. So that means it goes down to half its value every 2 months. Predictable, it's radioactivity. You know what it's going to do all the time. If you start off with 10, 60 days time you're going to have 5. And then 60 days after that you're going to have 2.5. And then you have 1.25. It's predictable. And so therefore you need to have at least 20 to 50 is a great therapeutic range. So you need that around about that level at 9 months. And therefore, to do that, you need to start with anything between 760 and 910, 980 sort of to start with. So when you've got seeds in you at 980 to start with, they are pretty hot. And so therefore, there's no discomfort to start with. The first 4, 5, 6 days, you think everything's wonderful and you get on with your life. Thereafter, you start to feel the effects. You will start to feel a little tired. You will start to. So again, don't do what I did, and that is that I had mine in November. It was really cold. I went straight back into work, and I was out and about. I had a lot of travelling to do, so I was wearing my body on the travelling as well, and therefore it was wearing me down. The other thing is, after about 7 or 8 days, you're starting to build up to maximal effect. Of course, with brachytherapy, you've got radiation inside you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's constant. You can't turn it off. You can't get a switch and turn it off. It's there. You're going to have it. But it's not a problem. Just understand what it is. It does sort of affect the rest of your body. It just makes you a little bit more fatigued. The side effects from that, with the radiation cooking away, is mainly in your urethra. So therefore, you tend to get a slight problem with a burning sensation when you want to go to the loo. And it's really because the urethra is getting a little bit cooked, and it's sort of saying, oh, a bit tense in here, and that tends to come out and you feel it right at the end of your penis. So you start to feel it's a bit hot, okay? But that's okay, because tamsulosin is brilliant. And again, don't do what I did. I thought, okay, I'm a pharmacist, and a pharmacist doesn't like taking drugs, because we see what it does to people. And it's terrible. And we don't like taking drugs, so therefore if we can avoid it, we will. So therefore what I did was, okay, well, I'll take one every other day, okay, because I'm not going to take drugs. Well, don't do that. If you need to take them, take them. Even 1.5 a day, or even up to 2 a day. You can take up to that, and you will be a lot better for it. I put up with quite a lot until I said, oh, this is no good, I'll have to take them a little bit more. And I did, and then it was fine. What happens is, between day 5, 6, 7 and 3 weeks, that is the maximum time, as it were. It's in that period that you know whether you're going to have any issues. The worst case issue you could have is that you'd need to be catheterized, because your urethra would actually squeeze down, because it would get so tight, because the radiation around it's causing an issue. This happens very, very rarely. I mean, exceedingly rarely, and I've never seen it happen, but it could happen. And therefore, but tamsulosin is brilliant. It stops anything like that occurring. So what I had planned with mine was that I actually had it in November 15th, and then on December the 8th we were going away. We were going on holiday, and we'd planned a long holiday away into the sunshine, which is actually great because it was really cold between November 15th and December the 8th, and that caused a few problems because it was so cold. When I got into the warmth, it was much better. I got into the warmth, I felt so good, I went diving, and I wouldn't recommend going diving because you get so tired. And so I went diving in the morning, I'd sleep in the afternoon. And so, which was the second day I woke up and I thought, oh, I'll go diving again. So I went diving and I slept in the afternoon, and I thought, why am I sleeping in the afternoon? Maybe it's because I'm diving in the morning. So I just thought, no, take it easy, let your body rest, come back. And then after that, it was no problem at all. I just started to get back onto normal life. Every now and again, if I did too much, I knew I was getting tired, and therefore, yeah, I'd go and sleep. And that's okay, I just accepted that. And over time, I started dropping down the tamsulosin, the dose down, because I found I didn't need it so much. One of the worst things you find you need when you have brachytherapy, and even with the tamsulosin, is you get latchkey urgency. Now, latchkey urgency means that when you get to the door and you're opening the front door, you desperately want that toilet. And if there's anyone in your way, woe betide them, you are going to knock them down. And again, a little bit of a funny story was that because I was going away, we were flying to the heat, and of course I was still pretty warm at 3 weeks in, and I was going through Heathrow, and so this was going to be a problem. The beauty about brachytherapy is you get out of jail free card. Is I have had iodine 125 implants, and so show that to security quickly, otherwise you're going to get jumped on because you're going to set every scanner going off unimaginably. But they're brilliant because they just took me to one side, they took me through, I got wanded, everything was good, no problem at all, and they're excellent like that, so that was fine. But then, because we were going on a long haul flight, other things, I wasn't prepared. If you're prepared, it's okay. So I get to Heathrow, I'm going through and I'm saying, hang on a minute, we're going on a long haul flight. Yes, dear, said Jules, humouring me again. We're going on a long haul flight. What? If when we take off, we go through some turbulence, I might want to go to the loo. I might get latchkey. If there's fastened seatbelt tying on, I've got a problem. What am I going to do? So let's try and get some tenor pads then, or some tenor pants. You try and get any at Heathrow. No. Think ahead. If you're going to do that, buy them before you get to Heathrow. So we went in, and the best we could get was sort of like ultra absorbent pads for ladies. And what we're going to do? No problem. I went into the loo and I put one in and it was okay. And I thought, oh, maybe it's not enough. Put two in. I put three in the end. I thought, that'll do. And so I came out and Jules said, are you fine? I said, yes, I'm fine. I said, let's go off to the plane now. And I was walking down, smiling away, fine. Everyone was looking at me, and I had this huge bulge there. And I was as happy as anything. And everyone was going, who's he? But I didn't need it because we were all right. We did hit some turbulence, but it was okay, no problem. So it's about being prepared with brachytherapy. But then, having said that, once I'd got through all that, it was fine. There was absolutely no problems. And then as I started to go through the year, through January, February, March, the number of times I used to actually reduce down the number of times that I was needing to, as I say, needing to use tablets, reducing down times I needed to go to sleep or anything like that. But also you'll find with brachytherapy, if you can actually get yourself back to fitness quickly, it helps with the brachytherapy, it helps with going forward. And I took it to the extreme. It was in 2011. I decided that I would have myself a challenge. I know, do an Olympic length triathlon in the Olympic year 2012. And that's why I started to train in triathlons. I did that in 2012. I actually did 4 triathlons. In 13, I decided to go long, so I did a half Ironman. In 14, I decided, why don't I go for the Great Britain team? I missed it by 90 seconds, so therefore, in 15, I thought, I'll have to have another go. And I'm a member of Oxford Triathlon, and I've just qualified for the Great Britain team for the age 60 plus, and I'll be taking part in the World Triathlon Championships in Chicago. So, and that's all thanks to prostate cancer. So prostate cancer has got me into the British team because I probably wouldn't have had the motivation to go for. Now I'll just and look at the time. I have prattled on for a long time. I'm ever so sorry, but I'll just tell you this: that with brachytherapy, there's some interesting other things just to watch. What happens if you have a radical prostatectomy is that your PSA drops to 0 very quickly. In fact, because you haven't got a prostate anymore. So therefore, there's no prostate cells going to go. With brachytherapy, what happens is your PSA starts to drop down slowly over a period of time. Effectively, you're 9 months, around about 9 months therapeutic, and it doesn't drop down in that time. It starts to come down, but it's thereafter the cells just slowly die. They've received a fatal dose of radiation, they're going to die, and they do die. So what happens is your PSA comes down. At about 18 months, possibly up to 2 years, sometime in that period, your PSA might start to rise. And in fact, I've known people whose PSA has gone up to twice what it was when they had prostate cancer. It's called a benign bounce. We still don't know why it does it, but it does. But if it does that, you don't worry about it. It goes up and then it'll start to fall again. And interestingly, if you have a benign bounce, because not everybody has it, but if you have a benign bounce, we found that those who have a benign bounce definitely have a much higher probability of success than those that don't. If you don't have a benign bounce, don't worry about it, because it's still a very high probability of success. But with a benign bounce, it just puts you on the top side of that. What happens then at about 3.5 years, is you can get a secondary bounce. So again, you can get another little bounce. And then it drops down around about 4.5 years, you should be down to the bottom. And then at 5 years, providing you're still down at 5 years or still going down, then you'll be clear for 10 years plus. You'll be disease-free at 10 years. So with my results, what I did was I came down from, I was pretty low PSA when I was actually found. It was like 4.6. But I came down slowly. I went down. I didn't have a benign bounce, but I had a benign flat. So I went flat for almost 9 months to a year, about a year. Then I dropped down again, and then I had a second. So I've had a second, not bounce, but a flat. And I had my 4.5-year results 2 weeks ago, and my level is 0.1, which means it could be 0 because the sensitivity of the test is actually 0.1. So another 6 months, providing I'm down there, which I expect to be, I'll be disease-free in 10 years. As a T1, with my that I knew when I had my brachytherapy, I knew that I would be at 97-98% probability of being disease-free at 10 years anyway. So it was a no-brainer ultimately for me. I could tell you a lot more about brachytherapy, a lot more. I could bore you rigid about how we improved the process, how we automated the process away from hand welding every seed to having it automated, how we introduced rapid strand to put better seeds in. But I thought what I'd do is I'd stop and ask for questions and just show you this as well, and just basically say, if anyone's interested, that's what seeds look like, well, pass it round. That's what a seed implantation looks like, that's me. So that's mine. All right, so thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I didn't bore you too much. And if you've got any questions, we can take them now, or I can see you afterwards.
Thank you very much, David. As it's my birthday, I'd like to ask the first question. Where does the cost of the operation stand relative to the other offers? We have a suspicion that the money does come into it in making decisions at the hospital what to do.
Yes. So actually, I can best tell you how because what caused the problem for getting this product, getting brachytherapy in compared to a radical, is the actual reimbursement. In the US, it's all about billability, and therefore it's about money. So a urologist in the US used to get, and this was a few years ago where I'm doing the comparison, a urologist used to get $27,000 for taking out a prostate. That was in the US, okay? And with brachytherapy, the physician would get $13,000, but would have to share it with the radiation oncologist, the urologist, so therefore would get like $6,500. So therefore, the urologist used to say, $6,500 for brachytherapy, $27,000 for cutting. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut. And so that was the biggest fight we had in getting brachytherapy in. And how we actually managed to do it is that we actually, in the US, we got a number of high-profile people to have brachytherapy. Mayor Giuliano, for example, we got him. He had prostate cancer and he had brachytherapy. So we asked him, could we utilize his as part of spreading the awareness as being an option for people, and he said yes. A number of sports stars in the States as well we had with brachytherapy. Andy Groves, chairman of Intel, had brachytherapy but slightly different. He had temporary implants put in, iridium wires, not the brachytherapy seeds. So it's actually much cheaper to have brachytherapy than it is to have a surgery.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was actually talk about welding both ends of the pellet. What's the size of a pellet?
It's about, it's in here, it's about a grain of rice, and it goes in an 18 gauge needle, and normally there's five pellets put in at any one time, and you space them, you put spaces in between so you can place them in, and you've got a needle that goes in, you preload the needles according to the dose in, and so each needle is labelled with where it's going to go on the plate. So you have a plate, and the plate is A1, A through A3, A4. So each needle is A1, which one it is preloaded in. And then the needle is pushed into the appropriate distance. Each needle is you actually pre-measure it. It's put in, and then there's a rod inside, and then the needle is withdrawn, and then the rod's taken out. So the seeds then stay in place.
Forever.
And that's forever. Yeah, that's it. And it's, as I say, and that's me, and that's my seeds in me. That's the trust that's in here as well. You can have a look at. So.
Dave?
It was interesting to note that you said that your PSA level was 4.8.
Yes.
And you decided to go ahead
Yes.
with the brachytherapy. There are people in this room that are still on watch and wait.
Yes.
But you've probably got a higher PSA than what you have.
Yes.
So it's an interesting thought. I would think personally, if I were in your position as you were, one of the great benefits for brachytherapy would be A, not having to take female hormone treatment,
Yes.
which I think has a lot to answer for personally,
Yes.
especially the side effects and after you finish coming off of female hormone therapy. And also the fact that as far as your erectile dysfunction is concerned and all the operating procedures that go with that, carry on as normal.
Yes.
So you can carry on living a normal life. So have you any recommendations that you would make to people that are on watch and wait like you were?
Right. So it comes down to a lifestyle choice, as I say. I wanted to take action. That was my lifestyle choice. Brachytherapy, you could say that, well, what happens if brachytherapy fails? Well, if brachytherapy fails, there are other options then. Then I would go on to something else, like hormones or whatever. because you can only be seeded once, as it were. But there are other options for you, HIFU, high frequency ultrasound. That's pretty good. So personally, with me, I was a Gleason 7, so I was moderately aggressive, and so therefore, I was bilobal. I was a T1, so therefore I just thought, no, I'm going to go for it. Now, my eldest brother is a Gleason 6. He's T1, and he's a consultant orthopedic surgeon, and he's decided to watch for weight. And I said to him, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes, that's what he wants to do." And I said, "Fair enough." But for me, no. My eldest brother's what is he? He's 8 years older than me. So, but he decided that was right for him. But for me, I would say, it wasn't right. I wanted to go on.
The second point I'd like to ask is there's many people in the room that have actually had radiotherapy.
Yes.
And there are instances where PSA will start to rise.
Yes.
And we've been told, or I've been told, that there is no more treatment that is available after radiotherapy. But reading recently, there is an opportunity with T3 scanning.
Yep.
And HIFU technically.
Yes.
Is there that same opportunity with brachytherapy?
Yes.
Because there is.
Yes.
Because there's always still a part of the prostate left.
Yes. Yes.
Living.
So can you have a radical?
Hmm?
Can you have a radical?
You could have a radical, actually. Yes. But it's a little bit more difficult to have a radical after brachytherapy.
It's hot, isn't it?
No, it's cold then. I mean, effectively, you're radioactive. You're therapeutically active for 9 months. That's about 4.5 half-lives. You need 10 half-lives before you're classed as totally inert. Mine was, and then they add some on top of that. So effectively, it's 2 years to be inert, but they always say 3 years. You carry your card for 3 years, even though you're totally inert.
Did you want to ask?
Sorry, mine's been answered.
Yes, I have a question. I've just been diagnosed, right?
Right.
I've forgotten it. I'm 9, but it hasn't spread.
Right.
I went to see the consultant, and brachytherapy was never mentioned.
Right.
I was told hormone therapy, which I'm on,
Yes.
plus external radiation.
Right.
Now,
So,
why was it never offered?
okay, because of Gleason 9, brachytherapy is excellent. Iodine brachytherapy is excellent up to a Gleason 7/8.
Right.
Okay.
Answer my question. Thank you.
However, the question to ask is, you can use palladium 103. It's not as used as often as iodine, but palladium 103 is active for the higher, so for 8s and 9s. So I would ask the question. It may be that a lot of centres offer iodine, some centres offer palladium as well. So therefore, question is, okay, would I be acceptable for palladium 103 and therefore have brachytherapy, because a lot of centres just know iodine, if that's what they've been brought up on. And if that's the case, then go to a centre where they'll do palladium. Palladium it's a shorter half-life, but it's a hotter half-life, so therefore they put a higher dose in you, but it acts over a shorter period of time. But that's an option just to actually search out. So I'd ask the question that even though you're Gleason 9, could I be palladium? But what you also then what's your prostate size, and that's another thing. And what stage were you? So,
Right. Well, I don't know what my prostate. I can't remember.
right.
but,
Okay.
The hormone. I'm down to my PSA level since I've been taking the hormones It's down to
0.1.
3.
Well, 3. Okay, so
Yeah.
it'll drop further
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
But no, I was just wondering why,
Yeah.
Oxford, the Churchill, is supposed to be one of the best in the world.
They-
Why it was never offered?
Well,
Yeah.
that's because they're focused on iodine.
Mine's Gleason 7,
You're Gleason 7,
yeah, and PSO's 3,
right?
and they said I didn't qualify for it. I'd just been offered radical therapy or radium.
I'd personally I'd re-question that.
Yeah, because this is why I come tonight. I'm really
Yeah.
interested in it.
Yeah.
Well, sorry to come back again. I'm
Sorry.
going to have the gold implants on Wednesday.
Right.
If I have those, presumably I can't then have
That's right.
brachytherapy.
Yeah. It will be very difficult to have brachytherapy on top of
Yeah,
that.
so if I come on to them and say, look, for God's sake, what should I do?
I would just ask the question about whether you'd be suitable for a palladium implant.
Okay, fine. Thank you very
Ask
much.
that question and they'll be able to tell you. Sorry.
Did you say after therapy it was possible to have radical surgery?
In some instances you can. Some instances it's difficult
Yeah.
because the formation of the prostate. It's actually part of that is the nerve bed.
Yeah.
And so there aren't many centres that would actually do it.
Yeah, that's what
But-
Dave had it done in March.
Yeah,
His brother was diagnosed in January. He had brachytherapy in March. His brother went to have a check,
Yeah.
and he was diagnosed as well at Oxford.
yeah,
And they wanted to do watch and wait on his brother.
Yeah.
His brother's a little bit strong-willed sort of thing, and he burst into tears. And he went, "I want it out." They didn't take it out, and then he said, "I want what my brother's had," and he's had his brachytherapy treatment done. And so really, you should have had all the notes. Did you have all bits of paper with brachytherapy on? And
Yes, yeah, but I still
Yeah.
wasn't offered it.
You had to be.
They offered me four different ways of doing it on the paper. And they said to me, whichever one of these you want, you can have. And I said, well, surely that's not down to me, that's down to you doctors to tell me which is the best.
no,
Well,
No.
they told him anyway, it's
Yeah.
that heart
Yeah.
rate.
They told me, because I had a heart problem anyway, that they wouldn't take it out.
yeah.
And brachytherapy is the thing to do. They didn't even mention any of the other ways round it.
But it's been very easy. The thing is,
I would say,
with
yeah.
fatigue, I think, I said, but he
Fatigue,
seems
yeah.
very tired. And
Yeah, that's it.
Is that normal?
That's normal, absolutely normal. And just accept it. Except if you're feeling tired, just go to sleep for a while. And that's it. I would you just accept that, and I just built my day around it, and I do whatever, and then I need to sleep now, and fair enough. And
But
then
the other thing with it, it's almost like you've had treatment, you've been diagnosed, but you wouldn't realise you've actually had treatment.
correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Innovative.
yeah, you will have some changes in your body over time. And sorry, we're running out of time. Yeah. You will have some changes in your body over time, and coming back to, and so therefore, although impotence and incontinence is very good, I would say that you will change in terms of your ejaculation will become quite dry with time. So your body will change in that way. So bear that in mind. But apart from that, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's been
On the same vein, one of our members was offered brachytherapy very recently and then refused because he couldn't empty his bladder fully. Is that correct?
You couldn't?
Empty his bladder fully. They said that he had urine retention in his bladder when he had pee, so
Right.
he couldn't have brachytherapy.
Right. Yes. So you need to be able to avoid your bladder. Yes. Yeah.
Do the seeds damage healthy prostate?
Can you use this?
No, no.
No, just talk into it.
Do the seeds damage healthy prostate tissue?
Oh yes. What it does is it actually kills the prostate. So you'll just have a piece of dead prostate inside you. So cooked meat, for want of a better word.
So the radiotherapy would kill the cancer and leave the prostate in better condition, or
No,
that kills
no.
the prostate as well?
Yeah, the radiotherapy kills the prostate as well. The difference between external beam and brachytherapy is that external beam you tend to get, even though with targeted and convolutal 3D tomography, you tend to get some scatter. So with radiotherapy, because you're coming from the outside, you're driving in through the tissue, trying to deliver your dose in one place. You do get bounce, so you get scatter, so you can get some collateral damage, particularly the anus and particularly the bladder tend to get whacked a little bit. But with brachytherapy, you can actually place it. Now, again, just a tip for brachytherapy: keep a high fibre diet, have a lot of fruit afterwards, and keep a lot of fluid, because one thing I got was that, again, I was trying to exercise a lot, and so you get dehydrated, and so you can get a little bit of straining on your bowel, and that caused, I got a slight rupture, and part of that was that the truss that was put inside me, the probe was, they weren't that gentle with it, and so it caused a little bit of scarring. And if you get some scarring, because of the radiations just on the other side, it actually slows up the healing process. So therefore, it just takes a little bit longer. So I got a little bit of scarring that way. But again, if you have a high fibre diet, plenty of fruit and plenty of fluid, and drink lots of fluid, that's another thing. Is you accommodate that totally.
Any more questions?
When we were listening today,
When Dave was asking this question, I understood he was asking whether brachytherapy could be used as a follow-up to external beam.
Correct.
Yes, and it has been used as a follow-up to external beam, and again, it's something which can be done. Not all centres offer it, but some centres would.
Any other questions? Yes?
May seem a bit sort of a silly question, really, but I was just wondering about the dangers to the people who are in the theatre, the oncologist or surgeon.
No, it's it delivers its the beauty about iodine 125 is it delivers its dose over a very small distance, so you don't have to be that far away from it to be totally safe. As I say, when I had mine, I could afterwards, if I lie on the floor, up, legs up, and you're going in through the peritoneum there, going into that cavity. Effectively, I had to put the Geiger counter head right up against my skin for it to read. But you just take it a centimetre away, and you haven't got any.
I can see that point for the patient themselves.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you've got a needle there with the stuff in and all the rest of them.
Again, it's just a distance away. If you're that far away from it, you're not going to get any dose.
I used to look at those as a radiation safety technician.
Right.
And I mean, we were always very careful doing iodinations through behind lead bricks and stuff.
Oh yes, 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 and that's it. And you could, but again, you look at the needles, and the needles are preloaded, and they're preloaded, and you have needle sleeves around them, and then they're only taken out and then inserted in, and so each one's marked, so it's out, and you're exposed for a very short period of time.
Sorry, it sounds a bit flippant.
No, it isn't. No, it's absolutely right. And
I can imagine somebody working behind lead, and it's the weight of it. Or the rest of it.
Exactly. No. It's as I say, the actual because we actually used to ship out. We shipped them out in little lead containers, but we shipped them out in tubes for the rapid strand, which is stranded seeds. I mean, how that came about was we took a suture, and a suture that you stitch somebody up with, and you actually can take the inside out the suture and then feed in the seeds. And we did that by hand originally, but then we got a machine to do it for us, and to put them in the right place for that.
Right. Thank you, David. It's been most interesting to have a talk from somebody who's actually been there and done it. And I think it's probably too late for a lot of us, but I know there's some people here this evening contemplating what to do, and I'm sure that you've influenced them in what to do. We've had a brief committee meeting just now. We've co-opted you onto our committee of the OPCSG, so thank you very much. So when I get calls from people asking what about brachytherapy, you're the man. So let's have a big show of hands for the brachytherapy.